Welcome to the Business Interview. I'm Markus Karlsson. Is Italy heading back to the future? Well, more political turmoil seems to be on the cards after Prime Minister Mario Monti said he's stepping down. Monti's predecessor, Silvio Berlusconi, has also announced he wants to make a comeback. It's put Italy back into the spotlight during the Eurozone debt crisis. This as both investors and ordinary Italians worry about the country's future economic direction. For more, we can turn to Riccardo Barbieri. He's Chief European Economist at Mizuho International. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Now, we've seen Italian borrowing costs spiking after Mario Monti said he is set to step down. Why do you think that investors are so worried? Is it more that Mario Monti is stepping down, or is it more about the fact that Silvio Berlusconi is saying that he's attempting a comeback?
I think it's both. Monti has restored credibility and confidence in Italy, at least a measure of credibility. And so the fact that he's stepping down, of course, caught people by surprise. The return of Berlusconi, I also think, raises concerns among investors, given his track record and given what he's been saying in recent months, which is more populistic than at any previous time, more Eurosceptical. He has been talking about perhaps the idea of leaving the euro as an option. He has been holding meetings with economists, some Nobel Prize winners, at least that's what he claims. And so there is this risk that Italy could become more unstable.
Now, during Mario Monti's 13 months in office as caretaker prime minister, borrowing costs have dropped quite dramatically. What has Monti done right, so to speak, to regain confidence in the markets? What's his recipe for success?
Well, first of all, we know that in part the drop in bond yields is because of what the ECB announced. So I think Mario Draghi, the other Mario, deserves a lot of credit for that.
So Mario Monti, to a certain extent, he's been lucky.
Well, the two Marios have worked in tandem, in a sense. In terms of what Monti has done, Monti has implemented immediately a further fiscal tightening package. He has raised retirement age. That obviously was necessary, was strongly recommended by the European Commission, by the Bank of Italy itself. Then the next steps have been, I think, fully consistent with the recommendations of the European Commission. So Monti has, in a sense, tried to apply the economic policy recipe recommended by the Commission, and he has succeeded to some extent. Not everything went through. Some of the measures were diluted by Parliament. Some, however, also perhaps improved, because obviously these are very complex reforms. So overall, I think he has tried to implement the European agenda with some degree of success. And clearly that has contributed to the credibility of his government and his personal credibility in particular.
But some indicators are still pointing in the wrong direction for Italy. Unemployment, for instance, has gone above 11%. What would you say the overall health of the Italian economy actually is like at this stage?
Well, it's worse than a year ago. There's no question about it. But this is being exploited politically, and it's because most people fail to appreciate the difference between financial conditions and economic conditions. Obviously, before you can turn around economic conditions, you have to improve financial conditions. A year ago, Italy was in the middle of a financial crisis. Without support from the ECB, it would have defaulted. And then without, obviously, the actions of the Monti government. Typically, once that happens, you have a lag of 1-2 years before you see the benefits from an economic point of view. However, today we have a bigger problem, which is not just Italy's problem. Because of the euro, we have no adjustment in a country's competitiveness via the exchange rate. So a country can remain stuck in recession. And this is exactly the same problem that the Greeks are having. They've made sacrifices, so to say. Actually, in practice, they have. They've accepted drastic cuts in their compensation. They've paid more tax. And yet the economy continues to worsen, unemployment continues to rise. Same thing in Italy. But this is not Mario Monti's fault. It's simply the overall situation in which we are, the constraints of the euro, most importantly, and the fact that at the European level we don't have a growth agenda to speak of. There isn't an adjustment mechanism that allows the countries that are in a crisis to be, in a sense, pulled out of recession by someone else growing above average. And that is the problem.
Doesn't that somehow mean, though, that maybe Silvio Berlusconi has a point, because he's accused Mario Monti of basically dancing to Germany's tune by pushing for more austerity measures?
Yeah, too bad Berlusconi was doing the same thing a year ago. So Berlusconi is not in good faith when he makes this criticism. I'm saying this as an impartial observer. Does he have a point? Of course he has a point, that we don't have a mechanism to bring back economic growth. And that's even though the ECB is trying with very accommodative monetary policies, although I think they're not doing enough. And we don't, as I said, we don't have a fiscal mechanism whereby we can allow countries to come out of recession before they tighten the fiscal stance further, nor is Germany providing any genuine support to the business cycle of the other Eurozone countries. And the outside environment is very difficult. We have obviously a slow-growing American economy with the risk of a fiscal cliff. We have slowing growth in Asia. Asian growth is anyway highly export-oriented. We have a few neighboring emerging economies with problems. For instance, in the Middle East, let's not forget, there is a huge upheaval in a number of countries that were growing rapidly. Russian growth is not what it used to be a few years ago.
So basically, there is no growth bastion whatsoever.
Exactly. So there isn't a major growth engine that Europe can rely on. There is pressure on all these peripheral economies to improve their external balances, but that means the whole of Europe must improve its external balance, because Germany is not allowing, say, Spain or Italy to have most of their trade adjustment by exporting more to Germany. So Europe must export more to the rest of the world. And as I said, the rest of the world is not playing the role of locomotive. So that's why this process is taking a long period of time, and it's difficult for politicians, for economists to explain to public opinion why we're going through this adjustment and why, despite the sacrifices, today things are worse than a year ago.
Now, Italy is now looking at another election, probably in February or at some point at the start of 2013. What's your scenario ahead of those elections? How will that change Italy's future economic course?
Well, unfortunately, I think the picture is the usual one we've seen for the past almost 20 years since Berlusconi decided to get involved in politics, meaning this time around the center-left is ahead, is likely to win the elections, but in order to win, it must form a fairly diverse coalition that may prove fragile post-election. The bad news this time around is that the next parliament will have a lot of populist forces, and some of them totally untested, because the movement of Beppe Grillo is doing very well.
The Italian comedian.
Yes, the Five Stars movement. In opinion polls, it has almost 20% support. Berlusconi plus allies could have 20 to 25. So you would have, although the law gives, the electoral law gives a majority premium to the winners, you could still have a center-left that, particularly in the Senate, risks having a very narrow majority, and then could prove fragile and exposed to the constraints set by the left of this alliance, particularly Vendola's SEL.
You're painting a pretty gloomy picture there of Italian politics.
Well, it's not. I mean, it's what is feasible at the moment. I think there are still a few things that can change between now and the election.
You have said that Mario Monti could choose to run for Prime Minister again.
Yeah, I think, and I'll say it again, I think it's his instinct his mindset and his whole career is built on the idea of not getting involved in politics, strictly speaking. Obviously, now he has a political role. And as he said in an interview recently, he always had a political role because he was an opinion maker on economic matters. But he's not a party leader, nor does he want to be a party leader. That's clear from his whole career. Mm-hmm. I think he could aspire in the future to being Italian president, or he could be president of some of the European institutions. And so for him, it's a difficult decision. I think the events, however, could induce him to accept a nomination for prime minister from the centrist parties. That would be an important development because it would make the centrist parties more competitive, and I think it would change a little bit the balance of the center-left coalition towards reforms, towards a more moderate political view. Mm-hmm. And from that point of view, it could be, I would see it in that respect as a positive surprise.
All right. It'll be one to watch in 2013, that's for sure. Thank you very much indeed, Riccardo Barbieri from Mizuho International. And with that, we're going to wrap up the program. Thanks for watching France 24.